Okay, well, let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. We'd certainly like to thank Senator McGinn and Representatives Owens and Anderson for taking the time to either hop out of your pajamas for a few minutes and kind of give us a legislative update this morning. Initially, when we were talking at the chamber about doing this event by Zoom, I thought, oh, it'd be really nice to be in person, but as cold as it is outside, it's kind of nice to all be inside this morning. So let's just go ahead and get started, and we will kind of go by seniority and ask for each of you to give us an update, kind of what's happening in Topeka from your perspective. And we have a few questions that chamber members have asked that emailed us earlier in the week, and we'll go through some of those, and we'll see how quickly an hour goes by here. So with that, Carolyn, do you mind kind of giving us an update?
Sure. And thank you for putting this together in COVID times and cold times. You're right. You're exactly right, Gary. Ended up being a good idea anyway. So I'm Carolyn McGinn, and I'm starting my 5th session. And I have some new assignments this year. So I'd just like to share a little bit about that. A few things that are going on there, and I'll talk about a few bills and then hear from the rest, and then hear what all other things that you want to hear about. This year I'm the local government chair, and I serve on Ag and Natural Resources. I still serve on the Ways and Means Committee and the Joint Rules and Regs Committee. In the local government committee, we have a lot of municipality cleanup language we've been working on. One bill that's taken a little bit more time to get through the process. I was going to carry it on the floor the other night, but we had a bill that held everything up, and so it'll go next week. But it's a Sedgwick County nuisance abatement bill. And what it does is gives the counties the authority to clean up these pockets. And if you think about Sedgwick County, you have a lot of cities that have kind of all grabbed land and grown together. But what happens is there's some land that's not of any value, may have railroad tracks going through, other kind of right of ways. And so people don't take those, or little pop-up communities that they can't control. And they've had a real problem for a number of years in trying to clean that up. But there's a lot of due process in there for the owners, and it's really problems that have just happened year after year. So we really cleaned that up, made it very tight in their ability to use a lot of steps you have to go through. And we put a 3-year sunset on it. So if we find out that Sedgwick County is abusing it, we can end it. The interesting thing is cities already have this authority. So if you think about some of those unincorporated areas, they just need to have some help there. It is designated for urban counties only, so it only applies to Sedgwick and Johnson County by statute definition. I did have other counties that are interested in it, so I think this 3-year sunset gives everybody opportunity to find out how this will really work, and then we can talk about other counties or not doing it at all in 3 years. Natural resources, not anything's really going on controversial there this year. No milk bills, I think there's some meat bills out there on the House side, but we haven't seen them. We've primarily been focusing on the budget. The way they're doing the budget this year is they're dividing it out into Senate standing committees. And so we've been working on the water budget and the ag budget this last week, and we'll still continue to do that. In Ways and Means, the new chairman is primarily chosen to just use that time to do subcommittees. And I've been working a great deal last week and this coming week on the social services budget, which is what I have. I have the KDADS, Children and Families, KDHE Health, and a number of those. And they're pretty large budgets, but I've had probably the most experience dealing with those. So I'm going to continue to do that, and we're moving along very well. Our budget situation is not as dire as it was last year when they had consensus revenue estimates. They estimated very bleak outlook because we were in shutdown mode. Since they came back in November, those numbers have since changed. Our numbers are actually into the positive, not by a lot, especially when I talked to you just a little bit about a tax plan that's moving through. But it's a doable budget that we can work with without draconian cuts. So I'm glad to see that. I also this past week had our 4th annual Kansas Passenger Rail Coalition meeting. We did it virtually. We had a lot of good participants, but it was the individuals that were presenting that it was really great. We have a secretary who's interested in listening and working with Oklahoma's Secretary of Transportation about passenger rail there for the Heartland Flyer. So she gave us her update on some things. And then we had Derek James, who is he's the liaison for governmental affairs for Amtrak. And he indicated that excuse me, the Southwest Chief, they will start looking at increasing those lines to where, we've got cut back to 3 a week. They're going to restore many of those. And then they also talked about if certain stimulus dollars go through, that they are actually going to look at the Heartland Flyer. If we can get all our ducks together, they would actually look to add that line and pay for it. And that's very important because on the Kansas side, it's 30 million. On the Oklahoma side, it's 90 million. So say Kansas really wants it and they figure out how to pay that, you would not get Oklahoma to go for it. So that was really great news to hear that Amtrak is actually looking at the Heartland Flyer. They would help pay for the infrastructure. Communities along the way may have to do some cost share on those stations. And then they would help you with operating expenses for the first 5 years. And then after that, as a state, you just have to know going in how much it's going to cost, because we would take over those operations. And this happens in a lot of states across the country. So it was really good news, I think, for our area. We passed the value them both constitutional amendment, and Stephen may want to share a little bit more about that, but it came about because of a court ruling. We'd already had passed some abortion restrictions, and the courts kind of threw those out. And so that's what started this process. It will be held in the primary, but since it's a constitutional amendment, everyone will get to vote. So if individuals are unaffiliated, they will get to vote as well. And that'll happen in 2022. We passed a transparency tax bill. What that did was take the tax lid off for local government. Local government we heard a lot of chatter from them about the timelines and that they were too quick and the software. We think that the House, I did bring that to the attention of my caucus. They said that 60% were all using the same software anyway. And then some other reason, but the Senate took it up so quickly that very first week of session that what they wanted to do was just get it in conference. And I believe the House has fixed some of those dates and timelines on that. And so that's moving through. Good news is counties will not have to have a vote of the people. They'll have to have a vote themselves if they make adjustments. And then we also passed a tax cut bill, which is one that has been around for about 3 years and has to do with, you hear those components such as guilty and expensing and other things, but this one had those components in there. Part of what we're trying to do is streamline to what the federal government did a few years and be in line with that. And some of it has to do with deductions, standard deductions and things like that. But there's a couple of pieces got put on. One has to do with your Social Security retirement, of changing that, because right now, if you make over $75,000 on your Social Security income, then you have to pay taxes. And so that was a change. Now, all that said, it was kind of like a Christmas treat up, and it's very expensive. And the House is going to have to do a lot of work on it. Our leadership wanted to get it through the process just to get it get it into conference. So the House has a lot of cleanup work to do because right now we cannot afford that current bill. So I think those are the main things that I can think of right now. But I think as I listen to Avery and Steve, that some other things could come up, but I'd sure like to hear what's happening in the House. We do not see each other because of this COVID. Everybody's in kind of trying to hide out in their offices and things like that. So thank you for giving me time for a little bit of update, and we'll look forward to the questions.
Okay, great. Thanks. Steve, do you want to take a shot at that? I'd have one quick question. Can you someone talk about that? You talked about the tax bill status. Was that the $430 some million Senate proposal? Is that the one you're talking about, Carolyn?
Well, I think that's where it started. I think it ballooned up to about 600. So yeah, a lot of work needs to be done.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that it ballooned up to $1 billion over 3 years, just with a lot of the add-ons, depending on who you listen to. And so I think that Senator McGinn is correct that the House is definitely going to have to fix that, because while I think we can, at least I imagine the three of us agree that we need to pass the federal tax cuts on to our individuals and to our businesses, now's not really the time to be taking drastic tax cuts when we're still figuring out where our revenue picture looks like. So I might talk a little bit more about that, but Stephen Owens, representative for the 74th House District. It is a pleasure to get back to Topeka and get to work. I will give the Senate considerable props because they have been tackling the controversial issues and hammering away at those much faster than we have. We really haven't taken up much that's controversial. I think we're going to see where that goes. But I am lucky to serve on the same committees that I served on last year, which is appropriations, of course, the state's checkbook. I serve on the judiciary, and this year they made me vice chair of corrections, juvenile justice, as well as I continue to serve on the Criminal Justice Reform Commission in the vice chair capacity. So spending a lot of time focusing on criminal justice issues, substance abuse, mental health issues that we all know significantly need to be addressed. So I'll talk a little bit about a few of those things, but talk about maybe some of the things that we've got done this year. First and foremost, the only bill, if I'm correct, that the governor has signed is the extension of the Kansas Emergency Management Act oversight. The House and Senate knew we were on deadlines very early on when we got to Topeka, and that things were expiring on January 26th and that we needed to extend them. So the only change is that we remove the governor's ability to close businesses and to restrict gatherings. And we then extended all of the other oversight and the checks and balances and local authority through March 31st. So that also extended the emergency declaration through March 31st and kept the checks and balances in place. Now we're currently working on some more permanent solutions to that, because I think everybody on both sides of the aisle realized that during this pandemic, there was an awful lot of executive authority when KEMA, or Emergency Management Act, was not written with a long duration emergency or a pandemic in mind. So we've got a lot of things in the works there. But suffice it to say, in that arena, we're in good shape for now, and you'll hear a lot more about that. Touch on a couple of things that maybe Senator McGinn didn't. We did pass in the House the Economic Loan Recovery Program for small businesses. This will take about $60 million of state idle funds from the Treasury and move them over to allow banks to lend that out at very cost-efficient, low-interest loans, and to ensure small businesses continue to have access to capital as they recover from the shutdown. This is something that was previously vetoed during the special session, I believe it was, or sine die, I can't remember, one or the other. But we're confident this year that that the Senate was on board last year, but that the governor will be on board with that as well. I won't rehash all the budget things that Carolyn spoke about, but things are a lot better than we thought they were going to be last April when we were talking about a $1.4 billion budget hit. That's a whole lot better, and so hopefully we won't have any significant cuts, but the needs are still there. Still an awful lot of needs that we're working through on the House side. We did pass a bill that I introduced last year in conjunction with the district attorney, Mark Bennett out of Wichita, that would allow drug abuse treatment for defendants that can get diversion. So if you have a drug-related charge, if the judge sees fit and you pass a couple of qualifications, you can get drug treatment in lieu of a felony and possibly in lieu of jail time. So I think that can make a really huge impact on our substance abuse issue here in the state, because currently to get state sanctioned drug substance abuse treatment, you actually have to be convicted of a felony to be able to get that treatment. So again, opening those doors. One of the things that I want to talk about that is a source of very serious frustration is the Kansas Department of Labor. I continue to hear daily from people that have been waiting weeks and months for their unemployment. And the need is so real. I hear from these people every day that are literally at their breaking point. Matter of fact, one of the people I reached out to, and as a result of some communication, we had a welfare check done because he was literally that desperate, and he's been waiting 8 weeks. This is something that the House has been working very hard on. We've been having hearings. We've been very frustrated by the Department of Labor and the lack of information that's coming out. We finally did do a security upgrade that, in my opinion, should have been done about 6 months ago. However, it is done now. And I think in the first 3 days, we blocked over 1 million fraudulent hits to our website. Predictions anywhere right now is that the fraud in our unemployment system could range anywhere from $300 to $700 million, $300 to $700 million of our unemployment funds were paid out fraudulently. So certainly some of that falls back on some aging computer systems and some past administrations not keeping up with that. But some of that certainly falls on current leadership and not taking the steps necessary to secure these things when we've had plenty of time and plenty of notice. The federal government's been warning us about our susceptibility since last March. So I just want people to know, I would encourage you to continue to reach out to your local representatives and your senators if you continue to have issues. We do have some contact where hopefully we can speed some things up. But I just know that issue is really hitting people very hard. Another issue that's hitting people really hard is vaccine distribution. And I've been telling people I'm really sick of Kansas being last, because we've been last at a lot of things. And one of those is vaccine distribution and getting those vaccines in the hands of our counties and of our local pharmacists. I think that we're making some headway on that and getting those out there. But I would still, again, encourage people to watch social media posts. I know our local pharmacy here in Heston has been trying to do their part. The chambers have been doing their part, trying to help people know where they can get to, where they can sign up to get that vaccine if they so choose. I don't anticipate there being a mandate, which has been a concern for some people. It's still optional, and I believe it will remain that way. But certainly trying to, again, hold our state agencies accountable for some of these things, because at the end of the day, it's the citizens of Kansas that are the ones suffering, and we've got to do something about that. So I could talk on and on. I mean, we're going to have the tax transparency bill come over onto our side. I think that while there are certainly some frustrations, I think that a number of those things, as I've told our local county governments, we'll be able to work on those on the House side, because the Senate really was in a hurry. And I get that, understanding the process. If it passes one chamber, it can get into a conference committee bill if we were to shut down for COVID or have to speed the process up. So I understand it, but there are definitely some fixes I think we can do there to help our cities and counties. I believe the overall benefit is going to be good because it does lift what's currently in place, the 2% tax lid, and gives the counties more flexibility. So with that in mind, the last thing I'll mention again is that tax bill. You know, sometimes you get in there and when there's really good ideas, like the senator mentioned, that were brought before them, it makes sense. But when you start to add up some of the cuts, as much as we want to cut them, you know, when you look at what our state budget funds and you realize that everything our state does as a general rule does something good for somebody, when you think about cutting those services, that presents challenges as well. So we want to make sure that what we pass on down the pike makes sense, so we don't find ourselves in a major fiscal emergency again. So with that in mind, lots going on. I'm excited to hear some of these questions, talk about some of the issues and what's on people's minds. So I'll turn the time back over to you, Gary.
Okay, thank you. Great update. One question I would just have real quick. You talked about the Department of Labor issues and constituents being able to get timely support. Are there any stopgap distribution solutions, maybe through the local government at this point? I mean, just your heart goes out to these people. You know, they're just, what a terrible position to be in.
I won't go so far as to say I was in tears, but my heart was incredibly heavy last night. And I told my wife, if it was in my power, I'd have people set up at the Topeka Expo Center at Wichita's Intrust Bank Arena. I'd have them there with a checkbook, handing people checks. There is no stopgaps, and no matter what we say, what we do, however loud we scream, the fraud that's uncovered, the accountability that as a legislature we try to hold that department to. At the end of the day, the legislature cannot control that department. That is an executive function. The only thing that we have control over is their budget. That's it. Other than that, that is an executive level function. And so it resides with the governor's office to straighten things out and get that distributed. I wish there was more I could say or do. I just do. I'm really, my heart's really heavy for a lot of good people. I've been talking with one guy. I mean, he's disabled Air Force, went on to become a police chief, got injured on duty there, and he's been unemployed for 8 weeks. His pipes are frozen on his mobile home. He can't get his wife's diabetic supplies from UPS that are sitting there COD. I mean, I'm just beside myself. We have got to fix it. We've got to fix it. Sorry.
I'd like to speak to the other side of that, though, just a little bit. When we talk about fraud, the fraud is not happening for the most part with our current state pre-COVID unemployment. Okay, so that is pretty secure. The fraud is happening when Trump added the PUA, the PEUA, trying to take care of people that traditionally have not had it because we did not have a structure in place to prevent that fraud. So our base unemployment has been pretty safe. The other thing is, and Stephen, I shared this with my leadership, and maybe you've figured it out too. We get a lot of these, and the ones I believe are legitimate are usually the ones, I live in your district, I'm from Valley Center, I'm whatever, a story, and you can email them back and hear back from them. I've noticed a trend, the ones that I believe are fraud and across on the other side of the world, they have the same information. They never tell you what town they're from. They put in probably a false social security number. They don't give you contact information. They want you to just do everything via email. And it's a trend that they all look alike. And that's unfortunate. So, but the other ones, you know, I send, you know, we have a liaison in the Department of Labor, and generally within 5 days, they've contacted that individual. I know 5 days is a long time when you've got to put gas in your car so you can go to work or feed the family. But it's a system. It's been broken since 1970. We, the legislative body, failed to fund it and fix it. We had no idea we were going to get hit with first. We were bearing down for the 737 MAX, and then COVID came along. And so we just got clobbered.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take a long time to fix. They are doing some things now, but you know, when you're hungry and you're trying to pay bills or pay for your prescriptions, it's just not fast enough.
Sure. Okay. Well, and you know, I don't mean to voice my frustration on you. I realize you're not necessarily part of the problem. So it was helpful to have that oversight or insight rather from each of you. Thank you. Avery, you're the newest member of our legislative delegation, so thank you for your efforts in your campaign and your first chamber legislative update 2021 Zoom style. Talk to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I think I have had the pleasure of meeting most of you guys in the chamber, but I just want to reintroduce myself. My name is Avery Anderson. I represent the 72nd district here. A few things that I will touch on. The Senator and Representative Owens did a great job on hitting most of the bigger items that we've accomplished or either working on in the legislature. But the committees that I serve on are Commerce and Labor, Energy and Utilities, Financial Institutions, and General Government Budget. A couple of the more fast-paced committees right now have been Commerce and General Government Budget. Commerce, because we are working on the unemployment fraud, as Representative Owens touched on, and General Government Budget, we are kind of the first step in the budget process in the legislature. We look over the budget and kind of give our tweaks to it and then send it to appropriations and then let them hash it out. We have also been doing, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So with the unemployment fraud in Commerce and Labor, a couple statistics real fast are that Kansas is responsible for over 9% of all unemployment claims in the United States, but has less than 1% of the nation's population. And Kansas has seen 1 million claims for initial unemployment benefits, with about 1.5 million in our workforce. That's nearly 7 claims for every 10 working Kansans. So unemployment in Kansas in December of 2020 was only 3.8%. And so it's been, it's way up right now, which is a big issue. Lastly, I am carrying a bill, my first bill, on the House floor next week. It's HB 2187. It's the first-time homebuyers bill. And I'll just give you a brief overview real fast of that. It would enact the first-time homebuyer savings account and establish modifications to the Kansas adjusted gross income of an individual for contributions to a first-time homebuyer savings account. So basically what this would do would allow grandparents, aunts, uncles, mom, dad to start an account for a child in Kansas that would give them an incentive to stay in the state, and then you get the it's back on your taxes. And the problem is in Kansas we have a big issue with outward migration, and so this would incentivize people staying in Kansas, especially people my age, graduating high school and college and going to places like Texas right away to either work or go to school. And so this would hopefully incentivize people sticking around in Kansas. And I think, like I said, I think they touched on the bigger issues. So that's kind of briefly what I've been doing. I'll just say I'm enjoying Topeka. I'm loving it. It's fast paced up there, but I think that's I'm trying to learn on the run, and I think that's the only way to do it in Topeka.
So I'm curious on that first-time homebuyer bill. If the applicant, if the person ends up transferring out of the state, then do they just use that money for other items then? How does that money get reallocated?
Right. So there's two options. You can change who it would go to. The account holder can change that at any time. And if they do just decide to withdraw the funds and that person moves out of the state, then you just pay a deduction. It's 5% in the first certain amount of time and 10% after that.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Interesting. Great opportunity to maybe keep some of that out migration from happening.
It is. I think it'll be really good for future generations.
Sure.
Especially, it's I'm in the future caucus, which is 40 and under. I am a member of that, and we're kind of pushing that because I think it'll help our younger generations.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I was really worried about how many people would respond with questions, so I spent a little time going through your bill status to kind of see what was on there. But this is actually a question from one of our chamber members. They were asking about the status of SB 61. Scared me because I didn't know what that meant. So I went in and looked. It looks like that's a student scholarship establishing low income, I believe, Carolyn. And I was curious, does that coincide with HB 2182, which is a scholarship for high need career fields as well, or are those two separate issues? Not to put you on the spot.
You're muted.
You might be muted there.
Yeah, I think those are separate. That's a House bill, so Stephen's going to have to answer that question. But on House Bill 61, we debated that Thursday night for 4 hours. What this does is it allows people to take a tax credit and donate money, and it goes to an advisory board, so that advisory board really determines which students apply or can get the scholarship. It started out with free lunch program in 2015, and they were expanding it to reduced and free lunch programs. I was actually just looking that up there at the end of Avery's conversation there on another computer here. And so I think the concern is that, you know, there was a lot of debate about it's not taking from SGF. But if you get a tax credit, you don't have to pay taxes. So ultimately, there is a hit to your SGF ultimately. So Stephen may have a different opinion on this. I don't know how far it's been talked about on the House side yet, but I did not vote for it in 2015, and I did not vote for it Thursday night. And part of my reason is, I mean, I will have to share, the one in 2015 has done some very good things. And I'll be quite honest and open that the school that came and testified is actually our church, Holy Savior. They have grown over the years. If you've ever come to my farm, when they come to our farm, they've gone from 30 kids being out here to 60 to 90 to over 120. It's been a very good program for them. And so it's just that we're expanding the scope. And my concern is I want to, you know, they can't really tell you what the fiscal impact is. I just kind of want to know how that does change revenues that come in for SGF for our K-12 public schools. And so the interesting thing for me is when I started campaigning 17 years ago, I talked to one family that I know that goes to Catholic schools, and they said they have no problem paying to go to Catholic schools and fund public schools as well. They said it's our choice. We have made that decision. I talked to another pastor from an evangelical church. He said the same thing. I have no problem paying my taxes for kids to go to public school. It's my choice, and I'm going to pay for my kid to go to private school. That mentality has changed over the years. And so that's the conversation that we're having now. It did pass with 23 votes. A few of those were passes. So I don't know what form it's going to come back after the House passes their version and comes back after conference, if it'll be more palatable or not. My guess is that the governor will veto it. And so when it comes back, we have to get 87 people to vote for it in the Senate. So I can't wait to hear from Stephen and Avery. I don't know how far it's gone in the House and what the discussion is. So.
Okay, great.
If I remember correctly, I believe it's passed out of the committee and is sitting below the line.
Okay.
I'll be honest, as any of the representatives and senator can speak to, we tend to be in silos, right? I spend a lot of my time in my committees focusing on that work. And so until it becomes debated in the committee of the whole or on the floor, that's when you really take the time to study it ahead of time and to learn about it. So I can't say that I have an awful lot of insight because I don't sit on the education committee. What I do know from an over just a general perspective is that we need to do everything we can to ensure that our kids get the best chance at life that they can. And our public schools do a fantastic job for the vast majority of people, but there are those that would benefit from something like this. And so I do think that it warrants a conversation for, especially for the kids that may need more assistance than the school can provide, or various other reasons that make sense. So I look forward to having the debate. I pulled up the fiscal note on it, and it looks like it's capped at about 10 million in contributions. Annual tax credits for contributions is capped at 10 million under this bill. So while still a substantial amount of money, I think that we'll see kind of where it goes in the House. I look forward to the debate and understanding it better.
So what you're saying is, Steve, that potentially, as it's written now, could be up to a $10 million hit to the state budget. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. In theory, yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Avery, any thoughts on that? Or it kind of sounds like that might not be in your silo?
Yeah, like they kind of mentioned, especially if it doesn't come through your committee until it gets really ready to go on the House floor. I haven't looked too much into it.
Sure. Okay.
So a lot of people in the private sector, of course, is supporting it. I mean, at least from what I'm hearing. And of course, the people on the KASB side, superintendents, they're not supporting it. So we'll have more conversation about it.
Sure. Okay. I think there was a conversation. I don't remember whether it was while we were online or whether it was before we started this morning, but we heard a little discussion about the online sports betting status.
Mm-hmm.
I raised that question for a friend of mine, not for me. Okay. What's the status of that?
I know that it's been introduced. I don't know that if it's been heard yet in Fed and state, which is where that would be heard more than likely. I know that from what I've heard, they really want to get something done. Maybe a little fascinating tidbit. I mentioned to you guys that I sent out a survey to every household in my district that had a registered voter, regardless of their political affiliation. And the responses I got back, over 80% did not support online sports wagering, which really, really fascinated me, but they didn't. So we'll see where that goes. But I do think it's going to work through the process and we'll have a vote this year.
Might be a little philosophical, but it's kind of surprising how we assume we have a very conservative legislative group in the Senate and the House, and to have a topic like this come up surprises me personally. Is this just because of the revenue that it's potentially going to generate? Do you feel that's what's driving something like this topic?
Well, I think anytime the Supreme Court was the one that ultimately ruled that this could be legalized. And so that's what opened the doors for state to take it up. Okay. And I think that in some ways it is a revenue generator, but I also think that there are a lot of people that want the ability to bet. And if they're not already, which one could argue that many are, right. I think that people just want to have that conversation and have that ability.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are wanting to do it, already doing it. Other states are doing it. Right. I haven't voted for a gaming bill in all my years. But the other thing that may get people who would not vote generally is they'll tie that money to either mental health services, CASA, something, and then that kind of will motivate people to vote for it. So
okay,
that's what I anticipate.
Yep, I would too.
All right. I saw that there's House Bill 2061 where there's some discussion potentially in that bill of raising the cigarette sales age from 18 to 21 with no vending machines. You see that as moving forward very far at this process, or?
Looking it up right now, it was scheduled for a hearing that was canceled and doesn't look like it's scheduled for another hearing. I think because that passed on a federal level, most people in the state are already operating that way.
Okay.
Because of the federal implications if they don't. But I don't see it currently set for a hearing, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Anything happening with the governor's discussion with the Medicare expansion plan? Is that above or below the line discussions right now?
Steve, I don't even know if it's a bill yet. Do you know?
No, I don't believe that it is.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I would be very, very surprised. Again, just some thoughts on that. It's no secret that our leadership doesn't support Medicaid expansion. And I don't see Medicaid expansion really being much of a topic this year. Interesting that you tied it to marijuana legalization about 2 weeks ago. I'm not convinced that actually helped the cause, because I think there are a lot of people that want to have the conversation about some kind of medicinal marijuana bill. But now that has been essentially tied to a Medicaid expansion, I'm not sure if that conversation will happen either.
Okay. I think a few months back, I think Mir hosted a group from Colorado to talk about marijuana, and man, the state revenues that's generating was just unbelievable. I don't remember the number, but it was such an astronomical number that I'd be afraid if the number I used could be right. I mean, it was such a large number that was generated for the state. Yeah,
I attended that as well, and it was really it was fascinating. Although that whole series was not supporting legalizing it in Kansas.
Right.
It did generate the revenues, but they talked about how it was offset by the social issues, the homeless issues, some of the other challenges that exist there. So while it would drive some revenue, I think the ultimate argument that was made there is that it ends up being less than 1% of your state budget, and that gets gobbled up in the negative ancillary costs on the back end. So.
I saw that there was a HB 2002 talked about presidential vote to a popular vote. Is that potentially a bill that might eliminate the Electoral College in Kansas? Is there anything going on with that bill? Have you heard anything?
I mean, I don't want to be the one to keep talking. Avery, feel free to chime in, or Carolyn. No, that currently, I just popped that up, it was referred to Committee on Elections, and that'll never get heard.
Okay. Would you agree, Avery, that's probably a good thing?
Yeah, I doubt that the chair will take that up.
Okay. Well, we let you off the hook on that one, Carolyn. That was a House bill, so.
Right.
Okay.
I can't control those guys, so.
We can't control those guys either.
Okay. All right. I have a friend of mine who wanted me to talk about Senate Bill 113, eliminating cell phone use while driving. And I point that out. That was probably not me, but my friend. Okay. Any ideas, Carolyn, where what that bill might be doing in the future?
Yeah, that bill's below the line right now. It's out of committee, if it's the one I'm thinking of. And so just to do a demonstration here, if you're like under 18, you cannot be holding your phone up like this and talking, which came from the AAA, and I talked to that lobbyist, and I said, well, if you're over 18, you can. But I said, a lot of times, if you put your phone up next to your ear, you hit the mic stuff sometimes and people can't hear. So oftentimes I hold my phone out here. Now, where it will apply for people over 18 is if you're going through a school zone or a construction zone. You cannot be having your phone up here and using it. So again, AAA, generally they propose laws based on statistics. And so again, I don't know if there's controversy yet or not. It did get out of committee and it is below the line. So it could come up as early as next week on the floor.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, can you kind of each talk about bills that you're working on now or bills you anticipate to be coming up above the line? And you might, someone might explain the below the line, above the line concept for those that might not be political junkies like myself or obviously each of you.
Avery, you want to give that one a go?
Yeah. So I spoke about the one that I'm carrying next week. Another one that I sort of had an idea on, and when I started talking to chairs and leadership, that it actually was already kind of being discussed, was a financial literacy class in high schools. And actually, Congressman Estes, when he was treasurer, I think pushed for it, and there was some legislation written up. It never went anywhere. I think, and Representative Owens and Senator, you can maybe talk about this. I think it's been introduced in the past and just hasn't gone anywhere. But I think that it did get introduced this last week in committee. They have not had a hearing on it yet, but my name is not on it. It's just I spoke with a couple representatives who had the same idea, and they introduced it. But I think that that's a good piece of legislation to get into our high schools.
Okay, great.
I'm going to see if maybe this will let me share my screen. Nope, I don't have that ability. If you could give me that ability, I could really show you how what above the line and below the line means. So a bill that passes that is referred to committee that has a hearing and then is ultimately worked goes below the line. And so let me share this with you real quick. Hopefully everybody can see that. So here is the line, okay? So any bill that is passed committee and referred out favorably for passage, or even just referred out to the committee of the whole, is what's called below the line. And these are a list of all of those bills that have passed that process so far. Not trying to make anybody dizzy by scrolling through them, but you can see that, you know, there's a pretty large selection. Well, ultimately, it falls on House leadership or in the Senate leadership to decide which one of those go above the line. Meaning, here's the line. These are the bills that leadership is saying we're actually going to work on this particular day. It's going to get a vote on the House floor this particular day. So when we talk about below the line, means that the committee has kicked them out and they're ready to be worked. Above the line means we're actually going to work them in the committee of the whole and in the body of the House that day. So hopefully that explains that. As far as other bills that I'm working on, two of them come to mind. One is, and we just passed it. Last 2 years, I've been carrying a bill really helping a national group out, it creates the crime of sexual extortion. Currently, we have extortion statutes on our books, but they don't really cover when like an inappropriate picture, an inappropriate video falls into the wrong hands, and then they try to extort or threaten to use that against somebody for sexual favors or things like that. And this is something that is affecting our youth and actually plays into some of the child trafficking, human trafficking that goes on. So we passed that one across the House, and I was happy to help with that. We passed the, let's see, the other one that I had the opportunity to carry didn't do a whole lot, but we have another one coming up that actually went through Avery's committee that extends the Angel Tax Investment or the Angel Tax Investment Credit. And what that does is we provide a tax credit for people that invest in new technologies in the state of Kansas with Kansas startups. Again, it's an entrepreneurial type of investment with the goal of keeping those businesses in Kansas and creating jobs in Kansas. So that's up for renewal. I've been working with the Commerce Department on that. And I've got a few other things in the pipeline you'll probably hear about in the next week or two. So I'll let Senator McGinn say a few things.
So just so you know, the House, thank you, Stephen, for that demonstration. The House is called The Line. The Senate is called Anticipated End of Debate. So that's, ours is different. But a few things I'll be working on through the budget, social service budget, is taking a look at the mental health modernization. I think through Representative Landwehr, they'll she had shared that there'll be some bills that do come out of the House on that as well. Ultimately, there are two areas that are main goals in that it has to do with making sure we have regionalization of mental health services, and even long-term looking at maybe some long-term beds in this area. As you know, we have Osawatomie and we have Larned, and that's where, if our folks need long-term care, that's where they go. We feel like the largest users of those facilities are from our area, so maybe we should look at beds. But a lot of times people just need the short-term beds, and so we're wanting to make sure that that happens. And that came out of an interim that happened this last fall, so it's been well studied and had stakeholders there as well. And then the other thing that everybody is taking a good look at is behavioral health system. And you know, we used to just divide up, you're either substance abuse or you're mental health. And we know now that sometimes those are interrelated. Many times, you know, on the mental health side, sometimes it can just be mental health without substance abuse. On substance abuse side, generally we find that they're intermingled, substance abuse with some mental health issues. So we're working to kind of get those two entities to start working together. I have a bill I introduced last week. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but I want us to have some conversation about this. I learned about it in DC at a Midwest Passenger Rail group. What, you know, we're finding out train lengths are getting longer and longer and longer, and they're over 3 miles. And so the bill, it was introduced, was taking a look at train lengths of freight rail that comes through. And as you all know, I don't have to tell any of you, we all have communities that are divided up and have a lot of train traffic. But what we learned from the engineers that are actually on those trains, they tried to also just have one engineer at the front. And the trains are so long, they cannot see the back end. So we're really talking about safety of a community, not just the inconvenience of dividing up our community. The second reason why it's important to take a look at that is, if we ever did get passenger rail, the way it's supposed to work now is freight has to move over. What's happening in other parts of the country is that the passenger rail is having to move over because the freight train is so long that the side tracking is not long enough. I doubt that this bill goes anywhere, but I think people want to talk about it a little bit. And because it is getting talked about in other states across the country. So we'll see if that gets some dialogue this year and where that goes. But I think it'll be interesting. One other little bill that's interesting, I didn't introduce it. Senator Straub from Great Bend area introduced it. And it has to do with term limitations of county commissioners. And we're going to have a hearing on it Tuesday. And I just think it'll be interesting to hear that conversation. I know what I think about term limits, but her situation though, what I thought was interesting, I thought, well, this would just be fun to listen to and see who shows up. But her situation is, in her area, when you're in a smaller community, sometimes you get people who've just been there forever, and maybe they all go to the same church, and no one will run against them because of their reputation in the community or whatever. And so she seems to have seen a few situations. When you're in a larger community, that doesn't generally happen, just because, you know, we're not all going to the same church or the same grocery store and that kind of thing. So, and you know, we have certain interest groups that just knock people out all the time. And so, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear what people have to say about that. So I may be hearing from Chip and others about that.
Okay. All right, great. I think I saw something about there was a suspended driver's license bill where discussions about reducing fines. Is that something that's moving forward in the process at this point?
Well, I wouldn't say that what it's doing. Well, first of all, yes, driver's license, suspended license reform is a topic of conversation and something we really need to address. I don't believe that it is reducing fines. What it is doing is, currently in state law, if you get a ticket and on that ticket there are 4 different violations, maybe no proof of liability insurance, speeding, busted taillight, no tag light. Okay. Current law, and let's say you go on and you don't pay that ticket, or you move out of state and you forget about it, or a whole host of different things that could happen. Current law says that when you want your license reinstated, you have to pay 4 reinstatement fees because there were 4 violations. Currently, better than 50% of people that get out of prison have a suspended driver's license. It is a huge barrier to people getting a job, to people being able to be able to provide for their families. So our suggestion is, okay, we don't want to penalize people simply because they're poor in that scenario. Let's be a little bit smarter and say you just need to pay 1 reinstatement fee instead of 4. And then also, let's speed that process up, because right now that can take up to 90 days to get your license back. We want to speed that up to where it takes no more than 30 days to get your license back. So just more some common sense approaches. We realize there's still that personal accountability piece where you ultimately did the crime, and so you got to do the time per se. But we've also got to think about the long-term impacts, and let's make it to where the reasonable average person can actually deal with their circumstances and get their license back.
Okay, good. Thanks for the clarification on that. So that is something that's kind of moving through the legislative process then at this point.
Yeah, we'll hear it in judiciary. There was another bill introduced that would actually bar cities and state from if you fail to pay your ticket, the way they couldn't suspend your license, period. Okay, and so that debate probably won't happen as much, because the reality is we've got to have that personal accountability. What I found with every judge I know is that if you're making an effort to make your payment and you stay in communication with them and you show up when you can't, they're not going to suspend your license for it. It's when you fail to show up and you fail to care about the situation that they will suspend your license. And I think they still need that authority.
Okay. Carolyn, I'd like to go back to, you were talking about the Amtrak financing of the rails in the various states. Would that be a standalone federal bill on the Amtrak subsidies to pay for those $30 or $90 million of rail expansion? Or would that be in the big omnibus bill that the federal government's looking at? Do you know on that?
I don't know for sure. I think it's in the stimulus bill. So, we all anticipated last year that Trump was going to do a stimulus infrastructure bill that would help transportation. So I think it'll most likely be in something like that, and not the COVID stimulus. Okay. So that's what I anticipate. Okay. I hate to say this. I know you asked about my animals, but I just got a text. Our guest house next door, their heater is broke. So I need to go find somebody to come out and fix that. So
I did, before you leave, Senator McGinn, I did just want to send our condolences. I just received word that Senator Bud Estes of Dodge City passed away.
I did see that. Yeah.
And so I definitely want to send out our condolences to his family and let him know we're thinking about him.
Yeah, we were hoping he was going to get back, but he's been ill for a long time. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to a good place for conclusion. We started a little late, so we're pretty much an hour into this. So on behalf of the Chamber Board and its members, we'd certainly like to thank each of you for taking the time this morning to come out and give us an update, COVID style. Rachel, thank you for your efforts on putting this together. I get to be the one sitting here on the screen all the time, but you and staff are the ones that do all the work. So with that, we look forward to maybe the opportunity to do this again in March. I think March 13th has been a tentative date scheduled, and I'm sure Rachel will get something out to the Chamber membership. And with that, be safe. Hope you get your heat turned back on there, Carolyn. Pay your electric bill. It'll be okay.
Yes. And a quick word for those viewing too, in the comments. I know that our legislators do want to hear from you on issues, so I will include their email address and phone number our offices. If you have any concerns or just anything you want to share with them, let them know what you're thinking. You can do that.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much for the opportunity.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Be safe.
Thank
And
you.
stay warm. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. I think it went fairly well, didn't it?